A very good evening and a warm welcome to Personal Finance. I'm Gugulethu, Cele. Now today we're taking a look at educating your children about finances. When to begin, how to teach them efficiently, and what tools can you make use of? Well, to answer some of these questions, I'm joined here in our Johannesburg studio by Eunice Sibiya, who's the Head of Consumer Education at FNB, Schalk Malan Executive Director at BrightRock, and in our Cape Town studios we have Bev van NieKerk, who is the segment specialist for the youth professional market at Sanlam. Ladies and gents, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a very big issue when it comes to children and money and allowing them to understand more about their finances. But just to get your quick overall views, Eunice, let's start off with you. When is the appropriate time? 5 years, 10 years old, or even 15?
15 is a bit too late. Yes, as young as possible. Children learn very fast. So you might not sit them down and lecture, at your children as if they're in class, but the way you behave at home, the conversation around finances, the practical, the demonstration, the things that we do at home around finances, they pick up, they learn. So it's as soon as possible, but they pick up from the behavior, the environment at home, what they hear, what they see you do at the stores, at the shops, at the restaurants, at the ATM. They think whenever you have a card, there's money. So sometimes they want something, as you say, you don't have money, like you have your card in your bag.
Exactly.
They think that's money. Where do they learn that from? They see the things we do. So there is no age restriction, but it's as early as possible.
I'm happy you made use of that ATM example, because I have a niece as well who thinks just go to that little box and money will always come out.
Always,
right,
yes.
Gugu, I fully agree. I mean, the earlier you start, the better. And I think always to make it practical at whatever age that child is in his development, to make it a bit of a game, to set goals. If you look at the fundamentals of building up some savings, set goals. That's one thing. You want to save to build more, the compound interest effect. So there are many ways to teach that with just day-to-day games playing. I think the other element that one often also forgets is just, you focus on building, but you also need to teach your child from an early age that you need to protect what you've built up, that other side. And I think that often gets forgotten when one do that. And you can teach your child from a very early age quite a few methods to be able to protect what you've built up as well. It's like striking that balance, that term risk-reward. You want to understand that, and your child must learn to understand that in ways that he, at his age, can appreciate that.
Bev, let's get your views in Cape Town. I take it you agree with your colleagues here. The earlier you start, the better, clearly.
Absolutely. There's no earlier, the earlier the better. And it can be very tangible with children. The old-fashioned piggy bank. There's nothing wrong with the idea of dropping a coin, and it makes a very nice, satisfying noise as it drops in. And if the child starts that very early, they learn to appreciate how that money can grow and how they can utilize that for something later. What's also important is for them to understand the concept of splitting money that comes to them. So if, for example, they get given a certain amount of money, that yes, they should have some of that to spend on themselves, but that some of it needs to be put away for a future date or for something in the future. If they learn the concept of saving early and projecting that forward so that they will enjoy it at a later stage, the sooner that message is ingrained, the better for them in the future. The other concept, of course, is also if parents match their savings. So if there's something particularly expensive, that you encourage the child to save and say, for every amount that you put in, I will match the equivalent amount, and help the child to achieve the goal that way.
Biff, just to stay with you for a moment, Schalk mentioned something so important, which is a goal-orientated saving, as well as the protection of the risks that might be involved there. But to come back to the goal-orientated method, are there techniques and tools and maybe certain accounts which are available on the market which can make it a rewarding as well as an engaging opportunity for youngsters to get involved with saving money? Because I think sometimes children can be slightly short-sighted and don't see the bigger picture that their parents are trying to teach them.
Absolutely. The whole idea is to try and make it as practical as possible, and that they see the actual tangible reward. So if they're going to have an account and if the money is going to be deposited, you do need to show them the balances in that account. They do need to see that the money is actually growing. Otherwise, the money just disappears into the bank or any other form of savings account that you've opened, but they don't see a tangible reward. So it's important to say you were saving towards X amount and you're halfway there. This is what your balance is. And also, Schalk mentioned the factor of compound interest. It's important that children see that compound interest is an amazing feature, which if they access that and utilize it, they can see huge rewards with that.
Eunice, to come to you just to add on to that as well, the use of these tools, because we know that in South Africa it's a very mature banked environment, so one can be able to open up a bank account for their child. And as Bev mentioned, clearly making them aware of the fact as to how this particular tool actually works.
So true. Tools we need and tools we have galore in South Africa. I think globally, not only in South Africa, but my focus is primarily on the behavior. My focus is always on the principles. The how, because most adults struggle with that themselves. So my worry is if we as adults are struggling with saving and investing, what is it that we're teaching our children? Because that's where the gap often is. So we need to get the grasp of saving ourselves to make sure that we talk budgeting at home. Children should see us budgeting as a family. There's always that concept that I always promote. Let's budget as a family. You don't necessarily have to sit your children around the table and show them your payslip and your partner's payslip. No, but they see the behavior. They listen to the behavior. We didn't budget for groceries, for so much groceries this much, or we need to stick to the basics, so that they also know that they don't just have to throw demands in the middle of the month or any time of the day or of the year as and when they think they need something, because they don't distinguish between needs and wants. To them, everything is a need. They don't know. So it's the behavior, the languages that I use at home that teaches them that there's a need, there's a want, and we always entertain a need, not a want. And once we got in the behavior, the financial management part of it, there are tools, lots of them that we can choose from. There are lots of saving accounts from different institutions from the age of 0. As soon as the child is born, they have a birth certificate, you can open an account for them. And to Bev and Schalk's point, that the earlier we start, the better. The benefits of compounded interest, they will see that the money is growing. And that teaches children the opposite of instant gratification. They then will know from an early age that I must wait and see my money grow, which is something that we were never taught. So it is beautiful for us to learn those principles so that we can teach our children to manage finances much better than we are right now, so that we breed a much financially savvy generation going forward.
You mentioned something interesting, that the parents also need to be thinking within that particular mind frame. Then does it mean that if they are struggling, then they should certainly seek professional advice from an outside party like a certified financial planner? Around the struggling part of it, you're your own advisor. You start with yourself. You sit down as an individual or maybe with your partner. You identify areas where you're going wrong. That is the habits, the things that we're doing and we should not be doing, and maybe putting limitations to some. Don't spend excessively on things that are not necessary, but also stick to that budgeting tool. Look at areas of where you should cut down. Groceries are a good example. You can cut down and just stick to the basics. Entertainment, maybe don't go out every weekend. Maybe go out once or twice, depending on the needs, the financial strain that we have as a family. Children see that, they witness that, they learn from that. Then, obviously, you are able to demonstrate and teach your children going forward. We need to get a hold of it first before we teach our children. Like you say, behavior and a mindset change. Schalk, you alluded to something so important earlier on, which is the protection of this wealth, because it's all good and well to have this money sitting in a bank account, but unless you ensure that there are measures put in place or products that you're making use of to protect against this, the loss of this income, it's a fruitless exercise. I'm hoping that you can actually walk us through some of the terms and maybe even potential ways in which we can teach the children about risk, because that's also another big concept that won't be easy for them to comprehend.
Absolutely. And maybe before I jump there, just 2 things to add to that. I think it's critical that children get taught the principle of a work ethic, like small chores, and the discipline of doing it on a regular basis. Because it's one thing to go once a month or once to ask your child to do something because you've now got a spurt and you've read an article and jump into to ask them to do something. That discipline of going a regular that ties into the concept of compound interest. It's got to happen continuously. I think that's an important point. So going back to the risk side, I think, firstly, as a parent, it again ties into that example of how do you manage your risk? So for example, show your child. You've got insurance if mommy cannot do her chores. I've got life insurance, I've got insurance to protect that. Mommy can then buy us food, etc. Show your child that, you know, you get great products that actually per child you can protect that child's specific risk, that you actually show you are protected, and that gives a child often also a sense of safety and comfort. I think that's an important thing. But more games that you can perhaps play with your child is things like, you know, if it's like one bird in the hand is better than three in the bush. Those types of educational type of games to show what will you choose, and then talk your child through why would you have chosen rather the three in the bush, but you have to go and get them versus the one in the hand, and develop that risk appetite, because there's always a trade-off, you know, between taking on risk and the reward. And the bigger, obviously, the risk, potentially the bigger the reward. And that, I think, is a great way to understand it. And the point is, not all of us are entrepreneurs. Okay, not all of us have to go and make cookies and sell it at school. We can be great at our finances by doing the right things for long enough, and you'll get results from that. So, and that's also important to understand from your child's development of, is he more entrepreneurial and risk-taking versus more conservative? And that will also guide you in how to develop your child.
Precisely, and making use of the tools that you also alluded to. I also just want to pick both of your brains on the use of technology, because we know children these days, you give them a cell phone or a tablet and they already know where to change all your settings and find the games. But is that also another means perhaps where you show them how to calculate these particular goals, or how much interest they'll be earning on whatever savings or investments that they've made? Introducing technology to teaching children about financial education.
Absolutely. I don't have specific games, but there are definitely educational tools to assist your child goal setting, learning goal setting, learning a discipline of routine, getting a reward for doing certain chores. I mean, if you think about, a lot of the games are based on that principle. I mean, there's a whole science gamification that's based on that. I think you know, it's about making it practical, making it exciting for your child, because, you know, it doesn't always have to talk about money, rands and cents. It can also talk about, you know, those base principles that we spoke about earlier. So definitely.
It's a behavioral change, clearly.
It is. If I may just come in there quickly.
Sure.
Even with, I think Bev mentioned that if we teach children to manage money from an early age, those that are at school going age, they get pocket money. What do they do with that pocket money? There's no plan for it. They just think in the morning, oh, what is it that I'm buying today? And me and my friends, we're going to, this one buy sweets or whatever, because I know as a child that I get X amount every single day. As I walk out, it hits my hand and off I go. If mommy says she doesn't have money, the child wants to collapse. Like, what am I going to do at school without pocket money? Because for them, it's going to school, pocket money, myself, my friends, you know, it's that pattern. But most of them actually can go without the pocket money at school. But you don't necessarily have to take it away drastically. Have a conversation. Budget. Let them budget for their own pocket money. How much can they survive with at school? And let them save the half or the quarter. Or they can start small. But in that, you're educating them. You're teaching them the principle of saving, the principle of budgeting. You're planting a seed that will make them better financial managers, or I mean personal financial managers in the future. So it's those small, those small things that we can help our children learn. Technology, they can bank online. They have bank cards. We come a long way, but already they have apps on their phones and that kind of thing. Obviously, the parents must discipline and protect, but children can actually teach the adults who are technophobic, you know, around technology. So we've seen that work. The kids are, you know, they're receptive to information. They love technology. Teach them the tools, the calculators, how to bank, you know, online, and we're all going to be a financially savvy nation.
Exactly. It's a powerful point to leave it at. We're going to take a short ad break for the moment. We'll be right back with more personal finance right after this. In the meantime, do be sure to get in touch with us. Send any of your tweets or comments to @CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410, or to myself @Gugulethu on Twitter. See you in a short while. Welcome back to Personal Finance. Now, we're still taking a closer look at educating your children about your finances. I'm still joined by my guests, Eunice Sibiya from FNB, Schalk Malan from BrightRock, and Bev van NieKerk, who is from Sanlam. Well, Bev, just to come to you when it comes to the current stats and figures, when you take a look at young adults and how they manage their finances, both Schalk and Eunice alluded to the fact that it's a behavioral change that you need to implement in children from as early as possible. But are there unique differences and nuances that you see in young adults who were taught how to manage their finances at an early age versus those who unfortunately didn't receive that kind of mentorship?
If you look at young adults who are comfortable with saving and who have developed a habit for saving, in other words, it happens automatically. As the money comes in, they automatically put in a portion of that away for saving. Research shows us that 80% or so of those people learned to save as a child. So it's an ingrained habit that they've started and just continued with into the adult life. The only difference, obviously, is that if they saved a small amount as a child, suddenly as an adult they're earning a bigger income. But very often the percentages that they learn to save are continued into their adult life. So if as a child they get money for a birthday or a Christmas gift and they learn to save 50% of that, you find very often if they're a young adult and they get a bonus, they take that bonus and they automatically save 50% and use 50% to spend. Now, if you can get that behavioral change done as a young adult, the power of compound interest will kick in, and by the time you get to retirement age, you've built up a really, really nice nest egg without using too much effort to be able to do that.
I'd like to stay with you just to pick your brain on what Schalk alluded to earlier on being the risk and understanding the need for wealth protection. Are there also significant differences that you've also picked up in some of the clients you liaise with? Because there's often a tendency for younger individuals to think that they're going to live forever. So why plan and prepare for retirement in their 20s when they've still got quite a while to go?
We do find that, particularly with young individuals, we find that they do believe they're invincible. They do believe they're never ever going to die. They're never going to get injured or they're going to get ill. That only happens to old people. And generally, it takes one incident to happen within their own circle of friends before the reality actually sets in. So we, wherever we possibly can, try and persuade them to understand that the sooner you start, the better. And many of the young adults that we talk to say to us that they don't actually have enough money to start saving because they're under the misconception that you need a lot of money to start saving. And you don't. You need a small amount of money. You can save 100 Rand a month if that's what you have. Anything that you start with is better than doing nothing at all. So our message to them is start early and then you reap the rewards at a later stage. And unfortunately, many people say, I'll start saving when I'm 30, then when they reach 30, they move that out to 35, and so on. And it just means that you need to save a bigger percentage, whereas if you'd started young, you save a small percentage and you reap better rewards.
Schalk, you wanted to come in on that point.
Yeah, it's a great point on young individuals, and we're seeing it also with BrightRock that young professionals and young students coming from varsity often forget that their future earning ability is their biggest asset. They've worked hard, they've had discipline applied to getting to that space of having a great earning ability. So knowing and understanding that is your biggest asset and protecting that is like we call it your future number of paychecks. And you want to make sure that that is protected regardless of your other saving strategies, because that's your best asset to be able to do that saving into the future. So if tomorrow something happens, you need to make sure that those paychecks keep on going. Otherwise, in any case, your savings plan will not work. Just to give you an idea, I mean, if you look at call it a 25-year time horizon, and you want to be earning, let's say, take a number 30,000 Rand per month growing with inflation, you need to have at least 10 million Rand today to be able to deliver that type of income.
Sure.
And you think about that, first you want to protect that as being your future number of paychecks, if that's kind of your earning trajectory, but also working towards retirement. You want to make sure that that is what you want to work towards, if that's what your current, call it, earnings level is. And there are great products out there to protect, call it, exactly your future number of paychecks, and products to look at that young age. You know, so I think it's all about you know, planning for that savings behavior, but also planning when things don't go as you planned. You know, because on the one side it's when things are going well, but not. And it's very easy with those types of examples to illustrate the potential impact of things not going so well on an individual.
It's a grudge purchase, but one worth making nonetheless.
True, absolutely. True.
But there's also the how, the discipline that will make all of this possible. And if we just get a grasp of that as early as possible, this is so important for the youth to train themselves to be disciplined. Yes, for adults to embark on that bandwagon. Often we find people save only when there's change left from their income and all the other expenses. Only when there's a couple of $100 left, and like, okay, maybe let me save a certain amount. That is very risky, and that is why most people do not save. Because if there's change, and then from the change, it's my transport, it's my food, it's like, no, then there's nothing else to save. Whereas if there's a term, budget to save. So when you're doing your budget, as you're listing your expenses, have an amount there for saving or investment. Let it go out as if you're paying an expense. In that way, you're sure that it's going to happen. And then all these benefits as Schalk and Bev are talking about will then be fulfilled. But we need to embark on the discipline. And this goes for everybody. But the youth have a good chance because they're being taught all of these principles as early as possible so that at least they have a brighter future. We can learn and break our old habits that are not working for us right
Paying
now.
yourself first. There's always a difficult balance as it comes to mind now, credit and savings, because also young people are also taught that, look, you can access credit, there's a personal loan, there's even advertisements now for loans that you can afford to pay off within 30 days. And I take it that also poses another threat and risk to the wellness and financial well-being of these individuals. Schalk, I don't know if you want to come in yet before we go to Bev.
Yeah, I think we all know about those offers, and I think it again then starts at the family unit, the parent example. You know, if you're happy to drive your car for that one extra year, not buy that furniture suite, I think that goes a long way to illustrate that. You know, because that's all about instantaneous gratification versus long-term benefit, and teaching your children of the pros and cons of credit. There's good credit and there's bad credit, and being able to understand the difference between those two, I think, is critical. But it starts with that, I think, that example of a parent and a caregiver.
Bev, to get your thoughts on this one, as we hear, it is the influence of the parents that does come into play. But in your experience, young adults, are they also one of those who like to swipe money that they don't have access to just yet?
Absolutely. As Schalk says, you know, we can set examples as parents, and we don't want to be in that situation where, as parents, we say, don't do as we do, do as we say. We want them to actually see us following the example. I think the most important thing is to explain to children the difference between good debt and bad debt. And the other thing is to understand the consequences of the dreaded debt trap. Many of the young professionals and young students that we work with, we find that a lot of them very quickly on starting to work get themselves into a debt trap, which is the worst thing they can possibly do. When they sit down and do an analysis of their spending pattern, they discover that a huge amount of their income is going to service that debt, in other words, pay the interest and not actually pay off any capital. And that's a very difficult situation to get into. So the actual setting up of your budget and making sure that, as Eunice said, the payment for savings becomes part and parcel of your budget is absolutely critical, because you need to analyze what you're actually letting your income go out onto. Are you servicing debt, or are you actually paying cash for things and avoiding those massive interest charges that will be there? So that differentiation between good debt and bad debt is critical. And the only way you can do that is to actually analyze where the money is going.
Well, we've certainly said quite a bit. It is time now just to get a quick recap on the key takeaways from tonight's discussion. Eunice, I'd like us to start off with you for parents out there or caregivers, the key elements that they need to be aware of when it comes to educating their children about money. What do they entail?
we need to set the examples. So we need to get our story right. We need to make some reserves from our expenses. Some of us need to make a financial U-turn from the habits that we're currently practicing in front of our children. And most of us are over-indebted, and that's not the right scene for our children to be watching every day. So we need to make some adjustments, then teach them to save from an early age. It is doable. They can get it right. We must just function properly. And there are tools, beautiful tools from different institutions that then the parents can utilize in order to guide and help their children to have that discipline and instill the right behaviors. And we spoke about saving early, and the formal and informal institutions, they both are beneficial. For the larger groups out there, there are formal institutions or formal types of accounts that they can use over and above the benefits of the informal part of saving, which are also useful to some degree.
Schalk, your points?
I've got two main points. I think key is this behavioral change of instilling like a work ethic, goal setting, discipline, regular discipline, because that culminates in building. It culminates in getting that compound interest going. And then I think on the other side, like we spoke earlier, make sure you take care of not just the upside, but also the downside, the risk, and make sure your children understands how to differentiate and optimize that balance with various playful toys and games, but also real scenarios when it comes to, for example, life insurance, etc.
Bev, I'm going to give you 10 seconds just to wrap up your closing points very quickly if you can.
I think the biggest thing that you can do with your children is talk to them. Discuss money with them. Let them understand, let them ask questions, show them practical examples, and show them how money can actually work to their advantage.
Thank you so much to all of my guests for giving us their thoughts and suggestions as to how best to educate your children about money. Do remember that we want to hear from you, so get in touch with us. Send any of your tweets and comments or suggestions to @CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410 or to myself @Gugulethu on Twitter. Until next time, take care everyone.